They look at you when they meet you and wonder if it's true, but they finally make a decision on what their experience with you personally is.
Marlon Brando in The Godfather, absolute legend. But behind the scenes, oh boy, it was messy. His co-stars were annoyed, the director was probably stress-eating, and Brando, let's just say he wasn't sending out friendship bracelets. He forgot lines on purpose, pulled pranks that weren't always funny, and left more than a few people rolling their eyes. So what really went down on set? And why did Brando, even after the movie became a huge hit, never let go of his grudges? Stick around, this story's got more twists than a soap opera. Brando's revolutionary acting style. Before Marlon Brando, Hollywood actors were all about charm and presence. Think Humphrey Bogart or Cary Grant, effortlessly cool but not exactly known for deep emotional range. Then Brando stormed onto the scene in A Streetcar Named Desire in 1947, and suddenly, everything changed. His portrayal of Stanley Kowalski wasn't just acting, it was something raw, almost untamed. One critic described it as a force of nature, and honestly, that's spot on. By the time the 1951 film adaptation hit theaters, audiences had never seen anything like it. Gritty, real, and completely mesmerizing. But if Streetcar made Brando a star, On the Waterfront in 1954 made him a legend. As Terry Malloy, a down-and-out ex-boxer caught in a corrupt system, he delivered a performance so powerful that director Elia Kazan later admitted, "If there's a better performance by a man in the history of film in America, I don't know what it is." And of course, there's that scene, the unforgettable "I could have been a contender" moment that's still quoted today. With his first Oscar win for On the Waterfront, Brando didn't just prove he was the best actor of his time. He redefined what acting could be, paving the way for generations to come. Brando's controversial casting as Vito Corleone. Marlon Brando is Vito Corleone. It's hard to picture The Godfather without him. But believe it or not, Paramount wanted nothing to do with him at first. By the early 1970s, Brando's career had hit a rough patch, with one box office disappointment after another, and plenty of chatter about his unpredictable behavior on set. The studio saw him as a risky choice, leaning towards safer options like Danny Thomas instead. Even Brando wasn't holding his breath, allegedly telling The Godfather author Mario Puzo that no studio would take a chance on him. But Francis Ford Coppola? He had other ideas. Coppola, a young director still trying to make a name for himself, wasn't about to let the studio push him around. "I was young and had no power," he later admitted, but he was determined to cast one of the greatest actors in the world. Paramount finally caved, but not without conditions. If Brando wanted the role, he had to do a screen test, put up $1 million bond to guarantee good behavior, and accept a significantly smaller paycheck. Brando, always one for theatrics, didn't just do a screen test, he transformed. He slicked back his hair with shoe polish, stuffed cotton in his cheeks to look like a bulldog, and even changed his voice, creating the now iconic raspy tone of Don Corleone. Coppola filmed the whole thing, and then pulled a clever move. He showed it to the head of Gulf Plus Western, which is Paramount's parent company, without revealing who was in it. The exec was so impressed he immediately asked, "Who is that?" And just like that, Brando had the role. Even after securing the part, Brando wasn't exactly drama-free. He traded his share of the film's profits for an upfront payment, ultimately missing out on a massive payday. On set, his unpredictable nature kept everyone guessing. But when The Godfather finally hit the screen, none of that mattered. Brando's performance was unforgettable, proving that once again, Coppola absolutely knew what he was doing. Al Pacino's casting struggles. Getting Al Pacino cast as Michael Corleone in The Godfather wasn't just tricky, it was a full-blown backstage saga. The studio had their hearts set on big Hollywood names like Jack Nicholson, Robert Redford, Warren Beatty, and Ryan O'Neal. Paramount's head of production, Robert Evans, wasn't sold on Pacino, famously calling him too short and unimpressed with his screen tests. But Francis Ford Coppola wasn't taking no for an answer. From the moment he read The Godfather, he knew exactly who he wanted. "He wanted me, and I knew that," Pacino later said. At the time, Pacino was a respected Broadway actor, but not exactly a movie star. His only film credit was The Panic in Needle Park, and to make things even more complicated, he was already signed on for another crime movie, The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight. His agent initially turned down The Godfather because of that commitment, but Coppola and producer Albert S. Ruddy refused to back down. Determined to make it happen, they went over Evans' head and got Gulf Plus Western chairman Charlie Bloodhorn on their side, forcing Evans to step in and negotiate. That's when things got really interesting. MGM's James Aubrey wasn't eager to give up Pacino, and according to Evans, he had to call in a favor from his friend Sidney Korshak, who had a knack for handling delicate situations. After what was reportedly a very brief but intense negotiation, Aubrey eventually gave in. As Evans recalled, Aubrey called him and said, "I'll get you for this. The little guy's yours," pertaining to Pacino. Even after all that, Pacino still had to prove he was the right choice. Just a week and a half into filming, the studio started having second thoughts. Sensing trouble, Coppola moved up the now famous restaurant scene, where Michael takes his first major step into the family business, to show what Pacino could do. It worked. "Because of that scene I just performed, they kept me in the film," Pacino later said. And the rest? Well, it's movie history. Pacino's Michael Corleone became one of cinema's most iconic performances, earning him his first Academy Award nomination and solidifying his place as one of Hollywood's all-time greats. Chaotic first days of filming. Making The Godfather was anything but easy. From incomplete sets to Marlon Brando's unique approach to acting, the production was full of hurdles that left the crew and co-stars scratching their heads. Brando, always one to do things his way, refused to memorize his lines, instead using cue cards. While some saw this as laziness, Brando insisted it was all about making his performance feel real. In Somebody, The Reckless Life and Remarkable Career of Marlon Brando, he explained that memorized dialogue sounded too rehearsed, like "Mary had a little lamb," and in real life, people don't plan out exactly what they're going to say. Director Francis Ford Coppola wasn't so much worried about Brando's performance, after all, he was Marlon Brando, but more about the rest of the cast deciding they wanted to do the same thing. Thankfully, they stuck to old-school memorization, and the end result became legendary. But Brando wasn't the only source of behind-the-scenes drama. Coppola had his own battles to fight. He wasn't just making another crime movie, he was making an art film about a crime family, and he wanted it to look nothing like the gangster films that came before. According to Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli, Coppola instructed his crew to ditch cliches and go for something more painterly than pulpy. Even the now famous restaurant confrontation had to be shot under bright lights to go against expectations. And if you thought Brando was stubborn, Coppola took things to another level. When the special effects team created a fake horse's head for a pivotal scene, Coppola rejected it for looking too unrealistic, leading to a last-minute scramble for something more authentic. He even refused to cut a planned scene involving a 1945 Constellation aircraft, despite cinematographer Gordon Willis arguing it would be a logistical nightmare. And if that wasn't enough, Coppola's non-linear storytelling confused some of his team. His idea? Show the results first, then the cause, so audiences would hear, "My God, the Godfather is dead," before seeing what actually happened. Stressful? Absolutely. Worth it? Considering The Godfather became one of the most celebrated films of all time, it's safe to say yes. Brando's unpredictability on set. Marlon Brando on The Godfather set was exactly what you'd expect. Brilliant, unpredictable, and just a little frustrating for everyone around him. He wasn't one to memorize lines or stick to rehearsals, which drove his co-stars up the wall. But in true Brando fashion, his off-the-cuff choices led to some of the film's most unforgettable moments. Case in point, the famous scene where Don Vito Corleone delivers a stern lecture while calmly stroking a cat. Turns out, that cat wasn't even supposed to be there. According to Francis Ford Coppola, as mentioned in Time magazine, the cat in Marlon's hands was not planned for. Coppola had spotted a stray wandering around the studio, and without telling Brando, plopped it into his lap. Whether Brando saw it coming or just rolled with it, his natural reaction added a whole new layer to Vito. Gentle, but still commanding. Brando's unique approach didn't stop there. He was famous for using cue cards instead of memorizing lines, arguing that it made his performances more natural. In Somebody, the reckless life and remarkable career of Marlon Brando, he explained. In ordinary life, people seldom know exactly what they're going to say when they open their mouths and start to express a thought. His improvisational style may have frustrated his co-stars, but it also created unexpected magic, like the moment he suddenly scolded Johnny Fontaine, who was played by Al Martino, turning what could have been a simple exchange into a powerful, tension-filled scene. Brando's turn as Don Corleone revived his career and cemented his legacy, but his unpredictable ways didn't stop after the first film. Coppola had planned for him to make a quick cameo in The Godfather Part 2, but when the day came to shoot, Brando was nowhere to be found, reportedly due to a disagreement with Paramount over his paycheck. Ever the problem solver, Coppola reshaped the scene to focus on Michael Corleone's growing isolation. Ironically, Brando's no-show only made the moment more powerful, a perfect example of how, with Brando, even his absences could leave a lasting impact. Tension with Al Pacino and James Caan. Marlon Brando's laid-back, instinctive acting style didn't exactly mesh with everyone on the Godfather set, especially not Al Pacino, who was all about deep, method-style commitment. Pacino, known for his intense preparation, had a hard time adjusting to Brando's more effortless, go-with-the-flow approach. Meanwhile, James Caan had a completely different dynamic with Brando, one filled with admiration, occasional frustration, and plenty of unintentional comedy. Caan, who brought the hot-headed Sonny Corleone to life, had nothing but love for Brando, though he often found himself on the receiving end of the legend's amusement. "I loved Brando, man. He was the greatest, and I, in turn, served as his clown," Caan recalled, admitting that Brando found nearly everything he did hilarious. But one on-set moment made Caan genuinely worry he had stepped out of line. During a scene where Robert Duvall's character returns from delivering the infamous horse's head, Caan casually reaches for a walnut from a nearby bowl and starts messing with it, only to realize too late that it was still in its shell. Just as Brando was delivering a line, Caan tried to crack it open. Suddenly, Brando stopped talking and just stared at him. Cue instant panic. "I upstaged him. I didn't mean to. I didn't even try to make noise," Caan admitted. Stuck in the moment, he carefully kept breaking the walnut apart, convinced he had just committed an unintentional acting crime. But instead of getting upset, Brando thought it was brilliant. He started laughing and told Caan, "That was great," explaining that the little moment actually worked in Sonny's favor. It made him seem distracted and impulsive, exactly the kind of guy who would never make a great Don. While Pacino struggled with Brando's loose, naturalistic style, Caan rolled with it, accidentally giving Brando plenty of entertainment along the way. Brando's extreme hatred for Burt Reynolds. Marlon Brando was never one to keep his opinions to himself, and when it came to casting The Godfather, he had strong feelings about who shouldn't play his on-screen son. Paramount was eyeing Burt Reynolds for the role of Michael Corleone, seeing him as a well-known, bankable choice. But Brando? He hated the idea. So much so that he reportedly threatened to quit the film entirely if Reynolds was cast. That put director Francis Ford Coppola in a tough spot, leading him to keep searching, until he finally landed on a then-unknown Al Pacino. Brando's issues with Reynolds weren't just about The Godfather, though. The two had history. Early in his career, Reynolds was often compared to a young Brando, which apparently didn't sit well with either of them. But the real turning point? A 1963 episode of The Twilight Zone, where Reynolds played a character poking fun at Brando's acting style. If there was any hope of Brando being a Reynolds fan, that moment definitely erased it. Years later, when Coppola considered Reynolds again, this time for Apocalypse Now, Brando still wasn't over it. An audio recording from the set allegedly captured Brando ranting about Reynolds, calling him the epitome of something that makes me want to throw up, and saying he was all about appearances. Reynolds, of course, didn't get the part, but Reynolds wasn't one to sulk. In 1980, he got his own little payback by spoofing Brando on Saturday Night Live. playing him as an over-the-top character who couldn't stop eating mid-interview. And when asked years later about Brando's dislike for him, Reynolds brushed it off with a laugh, saying, "I was very flattered." Whether Brando would have found that amusing is debatable, but one thing's for sure. This was one Hollywood feud that people still love talking about. The Godfather's massive success and Oscar drama. When The Godfather became a box office sensation, Marlon Brando's portrayal of Vito Corleone was instantly legendary. But when the Academy handed him the Best Actor Oscar in 1973, he made waves for an entirely different reason. He wanted no part of it. Instead of walking up to accept the award, he sent Native American activist Sacheen Littlefeather in his place to make a statement about Hollywood's treatment of indigenous people. Littlefeather, dressed in traditional attire, stood before a star-studded audience and politely declined the golden statue. "Hollywood's mistreatment of Native Americans and the standoff in Wounded Knee," she explained. The reaction was, well, mixed. Some cheered, others booed. And let's just say the press had a field day. Raquel Welch threw in a sarcastic jab while presenting the next award, and the media quickly turned its attention to Littlefeather herself. Tabloids questioned her heritage. Old photos resurfaced. And before long, she found herself pushed to the sidelines of the industry. And Brando, nowhere to be found. His answering machine reportedly greeted callers with, "This may sound silly, but I'm not here," leaving everyone guessing. Some in Hollywood shrugged it off as a dramatic stunt, while others insisted actors should stay out of politics. Fast forward nearly 50 years, and the Academy had a change of heart. They issued a formal apology to Littlefeather, admitting, "The abuse you endured was unwarranted and unjustified." She later took the stage at a tribute event, receiving a standing ovation and summing it up with a simple yet powerful line. "We're a very patient people." A moment once mocked has since been recognized as a groundbreaking act of activism, one that Hollywood took far too long to appreciate. Brando's fallout with co-stars in Hollywood. Marlon Brando was a one-of-a-kind talent, but let's just say he wasn't exactly known for playing nice with Hollywood's elite. Sure, his acting skills were legendary, but his unpredictable nature and, let's be honest, his habit of saying exactly what was on his mind didn't always win him friends. And Brando's reputation for being difficult didn't stop there. His on-set behavior was a mix of brilliance and frustration, driving co-stars and directors a little, or a lot, up the wall. By the 60s, he seemed more interested in collecting big paychecks than chasing artistic greatness. He wasn't shy about his feelings toward the industry either, once calling Hollywood a cultural boneyard and acting an empty and useless profession. Yet when The Godfather came knocking, Francis Ford Coppola insisted that Brando had to be Don Vito Corleone. And, well, we all know how that turned out. Despite the career comeback, Brando wasn't exactly Hollywood's most social butterfly. He avoided award shows, skipped out on major reunions, and slowly drifted further away from the industry. Even on Apocalypse Now, Coppola had to get creative, filming him in shadows to work around his, let's say, unexpected appearance changes. By his later years, Brando had fully retreated to his private Polynesian island, far from the flashing cameras and red carpets. While his impact on film is undeniable, his choice to step away from the spotlight left a lasting impression, cementing him as one of Hollywood's greatest talents, but also one of its most elusive figures. Brando's unkind words about Pacino. Al Pacino always admired Marlon Brando, but in 1979, he got a bit of an unexpected reality check. In an interview with Playboy, Brando was asked about Pacino's acting skills, and let's just say he didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. "He's a good actor, but not a great one," Brando casually told Truman Capote. Word on the Hollywood streets was that the comment stung Pacino, and rumors of tension between the two started swirling. But instead of firing back, Pacino stayed classy and let it go. Reflecting on it later, he didn't let it change his respect for Brando. "Marlon was a giant, but his criticism didn't define him or me," he said. Their dynamic had always been a little complicated. In his memoir Sonny Boy, Pacino confessed that his first real meeting with Brando on the Godfather set was nothing short of overwhelming. Coppola, determined to build a strong father-son connection between their characters, insisted they have lunch together. Pacino, however, wasn't exactly thrilled. "I actually didn't want to talk to him," he admitted. "I thought it was not necessary." He saw Brando as one of the last true Hollywood icons, the kind of star who belonged in the same breath as Clark Gable and Cary Grant. The idea of having a casual meal with someone so legendary felt completely surreal, but nothing could have prepared him for how surreal it would be. Instead of a fancy lunch, Brando, still in costume, sat on a hospital bed, eating chicken cacciatore with his hands. His hands were full of red sauce, so was his face, and that's all I could think about the whole time, Pacino admitted. As Brando chatted away, Pacino found himself more focused on what he was going to do with the messy chicken bones. Then, without a care in the world, Brando wiped his sauce-covered hands all over the pristine white hospital sheets. It was definitely a moment to remember. Pacino, watching in awe, thought, "Is that how movie stars act? You can do anything." But the best part? At the end of it all, Brando just looked at him, smiled, and said, "Yeah, kid, you're gonna be all right." Classic Brando. Brando's unusual relationship with Diane Keaton. Diane Keaton's time on the Godfather set came with its fair share of surprises, one of them being Marlon Brando's habit of flirting with her. Decades later, in an interview with Keaton, she spilled the tea, admitting that Brando had an undeniable charm, but could also be a little intimidating. "I never knew if he was joking or serious when he flirted," she confessed. And honestly, that tracks. Brando was known for keeping people guessing, and Keaton's story just adds to his whole mysterious, unpredictable vibe. Of course, Keaton's experience on The Godfather wasn't just about Brando's playful attitude. Playing Kay Adams Corleone was its own challenge. As Michael's wife, Kay was always on the outside looking in, never quite fitting into his world. She was supposed to be the story's moral center, but let's be real, she often got pushed to the sidelines. While The Godfather is considered one of the greatest films of all time, its focus on male characters left Kay's arc feeling underdeveloped. That last moment in the first film, where she watches Michael take his place as the new family leader before the door is quite literally closed on her, might be one of the most iconic endings in movie history. But as a social media post pointed out, it also highlights how little we really got to see her story unfold. By the time The Godfather Part 2 rolled around, you'd think Kay would get more to do. But instead, she was mostly there to question Michael's choices and serve as a reminder of what he had lost. Even her biggest moment, revealing that she ended a pregnancy to keep her children away from Michael's world, ended up being more about his downward spiral than her own journey. Still, Keaton has nothing but love for the trilogy. She even told the New York Times that The Godfather Part 3 was her favorite, simply because she was happy in her personal life at the time. Between Brando's flirtations and Kay's complicated role, Keaton's reflections add a new dimension to The Godfather's legacy. While Kay's story could have been explored more, her presence remains essential to the trilogy's emotional core. The Godfather's lasting legacy. Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather in 1972 didn't just shake up the gangster genre, it practically reinvented it. Pop culture, forever changed. Italian-American representation in Hollywood, totally redefined. Coppola himself saw it as way more than just a mob movie, writing in The Godfather Notebook that it was really a metaphor for American capitalism and a story of succession and power. Unlike old-school gangster flicks where criminals were just out for themselves, The Godfather turned its characters into a family whose actions, while a little questionable, were always about loyalty and survival. Suddenly, audiences weren't just watching a crime story. They were rooting for the Corleones like they were distant relatives at a family reunion. And that influence? Still going strong. Just ask Michael Danielson, a teacher at Jesuit Seattle Preparatory School. He quizzed his students on the famous line, "I'll make him an offer he can't refuse." They all knew it, but none had a clue it came from The Godfather. Talk about a cultural footprint. Reverend Scott Young even called it one of those rare movies that elevates film as an art form, while Paulist father Frank DeCiano pointed out that the movie isn't just about crime. It's a deep dive into power, relationships, and even politics. And it's not just movies. The Godfather's DNA is all over TV too. A social media post noted that Yellowstone is basically The Godfather with cowboys. Montana ranchers fighting over land instead of crime families feuding in New York. And The Sopranos? If you've ever watched Tony Soprano struggle with power and family drama, you can thank Coppola for paving the way. Even Succession, with its billionaire power plays, echoes the Corleone's legacy of control and betrayal. But not everyone's thrilled. Tom Santapietro told Smithsonian that The Godfather helped Italianize American culture, but one Sicilian-born woman, saying it look like all Sicilians are criminals. Love it or not, The Godfather changed everything. It proved that stories about power, loyalty, and family can turn even the most complex characters into icons. Decades later, its legacy still runs deep. So, what do you think about this topic? Let us know in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Check out the 2 videos on screen that might just become your next favorites. And don't forget to subscribe for more exciting content coming soon.